Angel of light, come into me, show me what I need to see.
Welcome to the Small Victories Podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria, an inspirational thought leader that offers transformational perspectives based on my unique experiences as a woman born without arms and legs. I feel like my life has been full of small victories that has led me to discover the greatness within. I believe that there is no summit upon which we reach our greatness. I believe it is a culmination of small victories achieved moment by moment when we turn toward the inward battle where we get to choose despair or hope, misery or miracles, defeat or victory. My goal is to awaken your potential, your purpose, and your power so that you can discover the greatness that lives within you. Think of this podcast as your weekly portion of tools, stories, and teachings that help you reflect on the small victories in your life. Thanks for tuning in, and let's begin. Welcome to another episode of the Small Victories Podcast. I'm your host, Pauline Victoria. What if the key to greater abundance, sustainability, and success wasn't about pushing harder, but about listening more closely? In today's episode, I'm joined by Matthieu Mehuys, a landscape architect and regenerative design expert who helps landowners, gardeners, farms, and even luxury hotels around the world unlock the true potential of their land by working with nature instead of against it. Matthieu believes that when we understand how nature actually works, we stop fighting it and start harnessing its incredible power. From backyard gardens to large-scale regenerative projects, he teaches how aligning with natural laws leads to healthier land, greater yields, and more sustainable success. Matthieu, welcome to the show.
Hey, Pauline, it's such a joy and pleasure to be on your show. I'm very excited to talk victories, small and big, and excited to be here. I love your work.
Thank you. I'm excited for you to be here too, because we were just talking before we hit record that I've never interviewed someone with your skill set. And I love expanding the guests I have on this podcast because I get to learn more. My listeners get to learn more. And what seems quote unquote gardening, actually, there's a lot of things we can learn about nature and working with it rather than against it, even though we consider ourselves civilized, quote unquote. And we think that means being in the concrete jungle and all of that. And nature is very important. And I live in Hawaii and on the Big Island where there is a lot of agriculture and we have beautiful landscapes here that nature just gives us. Honestly, I look out my window right now and it's a rainforest and it's beautiful, and that it's more beautiful than if someone could even have planted it. So yeah. I'm excited to have you on and to unpack what's in your mind. And I know you have a book also, The 12 Laws of Nature, and we're going to talk about that and link that in the show notes. So let's dive in. I want to know how someone like you got into nature and landscaping and trying to work with nature to bring out the beauty of what's around us in our civilized world, but also what nature has to offer.
I think it's a great question. So to answer that, I'll give you my backstory. So I grew up on a family farm in Belgium. So my father, actually today, still my father and brother are active farmers. And around the age, Pauline, when I was like 3 years old, I became extremely fascinated about how plants grow and how what a wonder in and of itself it is that if you have a tiny little seed and you put that into the soil, it becomes like a big plant or a huge tree. It could become an oak tree that lives 1,000 years. Like the moment I started to realize that, it was around, it's one of my first memories, and I was just mesmerized by that. And then by the time I was 5 years old, I wanted to start growing my own food. I wanted to have my own vegetable garden. Mm. And so on our farm, it was mostly cash crops and cattle. It's changed now quite a bit over time. But I told my parents, because I actually had an amazing teacher in school who taught us like how to propagate, how to seed. We had a small class garden where we spent a few hours a week in working in it. And so I came home and I told my mom and my dad, like, hey, I made a decision. I want to start my own garden. Where can I do it in the garden? Because they had already like a small ornamental garden on the farm. And they're like, no, we're super busy. We don't have time for that. And we don't have the space, blah, blah, blah. But I persisted and I kept asking. And eventually they said, okay, there's a little space in the back of the yard. Here, go and do your thing. And I started with growing some radishes. And if you ever want to start your journey of growing your own food, start with radishes. It's super easy. You put a few seeds in the ground. A couple of weeks later, you can harvest them and make an awesome salad. And so I had my first victory, small victory, which felt huge at that time. It was like the joy of harvesting my own food, giving it to my mom. We made a salad. I still remember it clearly. And so I told, hi, this gardening thing is fairly easy. So it seems to be fairly easy. So I'll just keep growing more stuff. So I got all kinds of other seeds, tomatoes, lettuce, carrots. Like I got all these packages that my dad gave me, or we went to a shop together to get them. And then I just spread all my seeds. I prepared the soil and I thought, okay, perfect. I'll come back in a couple of weeks. This is super easy and I'll be able to harvest my whole garden full of lush vegetables. That was my vision, and that's what I thought. And then I came back a couple of weeks later and my whole garden was overgrown by weeds. And I was devastated. The weeds were taller than myself. Imagine a 5-year-old weeds that are higher than himself. And from that moment on, and I still recovered my garden, and eventually, with the help of my grandfather, who was always a vivid vegetable gardener, I got to learn more. But it only was like many years later that I started to understand, like, why do weeds come in my garden and why do things that I want to grow don't work? It's because nature works in a specific way, and it has worked in a specific way for millions of years. So if you work against that, it's going to be really hard for you to succeed in gardening, in even development projects, in hotels, anything that's where there's a significant amount of land, which is pretty much everything. When I was 18, I had finished my degree in languages and economics. And I said, I want to go back to my roots and learn how to create outdoor spaces and get back to my passion. Because I also loved creating, like in my small little garden as a child, I would put stones and I arrange everything. And so I loved doing that. So I decided to study a bachelor in garden design, which was interesting, but it was also like, oh, now I have to design small gardens, and it felt like incomplete. So I did another master degree in landscape architecture in Munich. And then I got into, it was for big development projects there. And I got into what everyone told me to do, is like get a 9-to-5 job. And I did that for 2.5 years. And after a couple of months in the job, I became quite depressed and miserable because the 9-to-5 thing wasn't for me. I learned a whole lot. Like working in Germany is great. It's the highest engineering degree of work that I was able to do. But it wasn't for me. So I quit my job. I packed a backpack and I said, okay, I want to travel the world and discover all projects that are doing good for the world. Because I also found out, like, I grew up with The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore, climate change, like all these dooms thinking. And I was like, yeah, okay, we can all complain about what's happening, but what are the solutions and what are people actually doing? And so from that whole travel, I got into permaculture, where I finally started to understand how nature works. I did a bunch of other trainings. I worked with regenerative farming. We started applying it on our own farm in Belgium. And from that whole experience of traveling, I brought back all my knowledge whole. And it happened in a bit of a disruptive way, because I was traveling the world for 1.5 years. I had a remote job on my computer. I was surfing. I was living a really cool life. But then I went to the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador, and I was there with an indigenous person that took me to the depth of the Amazon rainforest, and I saw so many animals. It was such a rich experience. And from being there, I got stung by a mosquito that had the dengue fever, and I got dengue fever. And I became really sick. So like my whole life collapsed. Also my girlfriend dumped me at the time. I didn't have any more money. Like everything was like down. And now in retrospect, I'm very grateful for it, because that whole experience triggered, I think it's a gift from God to be like, hey, you've traveled the world, you've grown up on the farm, you have all this knowledge, you've done the whole thing. Now it's time for you to actually go and do something with it and change the world in some shape or form. That's the story I like to believe in. I think everyone on this planet is here for a certain reason, to fulfill something. Through that dark experience, you could say, or this difficult time, I started to realize, okay, I have all this experience, and I want to have an impact. And I've tried it to the 9-to-5 thing. It wasn't for me. It was very bureaucratic. Okay, who are the people that are actually changing the world? It turns out it's the entrepreneurs. It's the people that wake up at 5 a.m. and grow their business and have to deal with clients, go bankrupt. That these are in all shapes and forms. Like, it's a tough journey. One of the toughest things I've ever done. I'm in business now for 5 years. But these are the people that change the world. So I said, okay, I'm going to start my business. And we started with more like garden designs in Belgium. But we always combined doing something that's beautiful and aesthetic and also luxurious, if that was what the client wants. But at the same time, using the knowledge of nature and making it either lower in maintenance or just more logical, and using the power of nature to accomplish these goals. Because I see that many people get confused that if they want to grow their own garden, that it has to cost them a fortune or that it has to be like super high maintenance. So that's from that need we founded our company. And fast forward 5 years in the business, we have clients in 6 continents now. We just started a new project in Costa Rica, which is super exciting. It's a 150-hectare farm that we're completely redesigning. So we're doing all kinds of projects, from farms to developments to estates to still we're doing gardens too. I also coach people online how to design, create, and maintain their own garden. I built like a masterclass for it because it's a funny story. I had a client that we did the redesign for the property, and she said, after we did a nice work, she said, I really love the work you've done, but you know what? I'm sick and tired of having a landscape architect because I see how much fun you have in building this and designing this. I want to do it myself. And they had a big property, and we only did a portion of it. And I said to her, you know what? I'm going to teach you everything that I know, and I'll compress it into a 9-week course. And she was my first client for the course. And now, even that course is across US, Canada, Europe, of course. And then we have some in Australia. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell. I think I could keep talking, but then I want to see where you have more questions.
Yes. Okay. So maybe the listener is like me and ignorant. So I would like just to unpack a couple definitions. What is permaculture and what does regenerative design mean?
Thank you for asking that. This is a great question because it's true. Not everyone knows what it is, and it's not ignorance. It's just a way of that word. So I could first unpack what permaculture is. If you look at the word permaculture, it means permanent culture. You have agriculture, which is farming, and it always has to be worked, and we always have to keep doing work. So they came up with this name permaculture. So you do one thing, a design, you plant something, and then it stays permanently, and you can harvest, you can eat. So the whole goal, instead of having to work constantly on your garden, it's something that is more permanent. And that does mean that you don't have any maintenance at all. You always have to do something. But the goal is to create an ecosystem that works in harmony with nature, but also gives you the needs that you want. Because I also believe that humans are or can be, whether or not we like it, can be part of nature. You can decide, okay, I'm going to build a concrete jungle and I'm going to disconnect from nature. Good, but that's why many people have depressions and that there's lots of diseases, mental issues. I think that has to do with all this pollution, obviously, too. But anyways, this permaculture way of looking at it is creating, let's say if you have a property and you want to become self-sufficient and grow your own food, but you want to do it in a smart and efficient way, permaculture can really help you. But then what I also realized by studying permaculture is that the whole permaculture idea is great, but it's almost too idealistic that if you want to do permaculture, you almost have to stop your other things in your life. Because a permaculture garden, even if it's less maintenance and you want to become self-sufficient, you still have to manage the whole thing and do a lot of work. So that's where I got even more interested in. it doesn't make complete sense to expect that everyone should go back to living as if we lived 200 years ago. That's not realistic. But let's take the elements that are interesting and that work and use that and apply them to the modern needs of what we like in a garden. And that's where I understood, which kind of even beyond permaculture or beyond sustainable gardening, is regenerative design. And regenerative design, the way I got to it is through regenerative agriculture. In fact, agriculture in many ways is way ahead of us in all the innovations that happen first in agriculture. Like the biggest user of AI at the moment, I don't know if it's still accurate today, at least it was a few months ago, is agriculture. So they use data, they make projections. John Deere is big on AI. Like they are the ones that bringing forward how we use AI. And that's the same with the regenerative agriculture, which is a way of farming that is more in harmony with nature. And where there's a few basic things that you have to do. You focus on soil health, you focus on keeping the soil covered as much as possible. And there's a few more things I could explain in that, but in essence, it comes down to like, how can you get the goals that you want? Producing food, having something beautiful, without having a bad impact on the environment, in fact, using or harnessing the power of nature in your project. And that works in specific ways, and that's really what regenerative design is now, and what we apply in all our projects.
So you've said the power of nature a few times already in this interview.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that brings me maybe to my book, 12 Universal Laws of Nature, How to Use Your Land to Its Full Potential. The power of nature, it's almost like an invisible force that we cannot see, and it's a way in which nature works. And if we look at how there's a whole science behind it, is like, what happens if you have bare soil in your garden? Like in nature, soil doesn't really happen that often, only if there's a landslide or if there's wildfire. And this is like ground zero of soil. It's like, it's completely open, it's untouched. What nature then does, nature always has the force, the need, power again to get to a higher evolution. So if you have bare soil, nature will always try to push itself to go to a mature forest, even in your case, into a mature rainforest. That's what nature wants to create. That's like the ultimate goal of nature, is to have lush, green, complex systems that work in harmony in and of itself. And nature can do that on its own. So to understand the power of nature is like, again, bare soil almost never happens in nature. If you go into your rainforest, you won't see patches of dirt. It's always overgrown, or there's always something growing. And then if we go to our gardens, for some reason, someone thought, if we want to have a nice, pretty garden, we should see bare soil between the plants, and we should manicure it as if you're cleaning up your house. But if you do that, you're sending a signal to nature, this is ground zero. Now that patch of bare soil, we want to bring that into the evolution and change that towards a rainforest in your climate in Hawaii. Different in different areas of the world. But I'm trying to make it relatable to you. And so the first plants that nature sends in, or what do you think are the first plants that nature sends in to start the process of getting to that maximum evolution rainforest?
Weeds.
Exactly. You got it. We invented that nasty word, weed. Everyone has too much weeds in my garden. But it's just nature's way of recovering or restoring itself. So it's a mechanism that always keeps coming back. So if you're constantly removing the weeds and having your soil bare, I can guarantee you, even if you use chemicals and whatever nonsense there's out there, these weeds will always come back. So we're constantly fighting nature. So why are we doing that? Why are we not using the power of nature? And why are we not looking at nature, how it evolves, and using that power? So that already brings me into like more practical tips. And again, or one of the principles of regenerative design and permaculture is, don't keep your soil bare. because that's the idea. If you keep the soil bare, nature will come in and send you the weeds. Weeds are just animals that have a lot of strength and often have a lot of medicinal power too. That's another topic, because they can capture lots of minerals from the soil. That's what their job is. Put more minerals in the soil if you destroyed it. So getting back to having your soil covered is like a key thing. If you want to reduce the maintenance of your garden, make sure that you have cover on the soil. And you can do cover on the soil by planting more different types of plants, like ground covers if you want to keep it low, or there's a whole bunch of plants that we can choose from. But even if you do that, when you start a new garden, you will always have patches of bare soil, right? Then we use mulches. Mulch is a great tool to then cover the soil and protect the soil. So even if we do a transformation of a garden, we will have to remove things and maybe remove some soil and move things around. But as we do that, we cover the soil as fast as possible. Because another problem is that if you keep the soil open, the topsoil of our planet is like the skin of our planet. So you can imagine we have Mother Earth, it's mostly water, but on the Earth's surface, that is like the top skin. That's like the skin of our bodies. So what we do is scratch it open all the time, and that gives like infections and mold, like on our own skin. If you have a wound, you want to cover it too with some cream or something. Same with the soil, you don't want it to be open, because if you leave it open, then you'll have also more diseases. The soil dries out faster, and more weeds come in, and more importantly, you actually destroy the soil biology. That's another force of nature, is the very thing that keeps us alive on this planet is the microorganisms. Even in our own system, there's more microorganisms than we have human cells. Like the amount of humans, there's more microorganisms than human cells in our body. Obviously, they're very small, but they help us with our digestive system. And if we eat food that's full of chemicals, those microorganisms will die and your digestive system isn't properly working. That's why we have so many diseases like cancer, diabetes, that's all related to chemicals in food and in general in pollution. And the funny thing is, it's exactly the same with the soil. So if you keep the soil open, or if you use chemicals, then those microorganisms die. And then even if you plant plants in that soil, they will become weaker, because the plants have a symbiosis with the plants. In fact, plants grow, they do photosynthesis, they harvest sugar, or they produce sugar in forms of glucoses, and they give that to the microorganisms as food. And then in exchange, the microorganisms give minerals and nutrients to the plants. It's like a big stock exchange where they're constantly trading sugar for minerals and nutrients, but highly complex. We're only starting to understand a little bit of that world. We know more of the galaxies than we know what's happening under the soil. This research is coming out now. It's wild. Very interesting. But we do know that healthy soil is important or is not important, it's the key. Because if you don't have healthy soil and then you're growing, plants will still somewhat grow. And that's one of the laws in my book, is the law of vibration. It's a universal law. It's not something that I came up with. And the law of vibration, when you look at plants, if plants are unhealthy, they vibrate at a lower frequency. Same with humans, actually. If you're sick, it's harder to vibrate high, even though some people can still do that. But anyways, if plants are sick, the frequency drops. And as the frequency drops, it sends out signals to insects and bugs to be like, oh, this plant is sick. It's probably going to die, so let's attack it now and recycle all the nutrients. So this is then the crazy thing. If people use chemicals in their garden and the plants are suffering because the microorganisms are dead, and then the plants somewhat grow, but then they get constantly attacked by insects. As it's like a vicious circle. Whereas if you do it around and work with nature and you do things that stimulate microbiology in the soil, and by the way, if you have a high biology soil and you put your hands or you're outside and you work in the garden and you're just generally in contact with nature, those microorganisms get absorbed in your body and they help your digestive system. That's why Japan, if people are sick or depressed, the doctors prescribe them forest bathing. Actually, doctors will tell you, okay, you're not good, you've worked too much, you need to go in nature and hug some trees. And that will make you healthier because there's a science behind it. That's in a nutshell, like I'm trying to point left and right.
Yeah.
The force of nature is so important for us as a human race, for your property, and in general, even to have less meat.
Fascinating. So how do we know if our soil is healthy?
Yeah, another excellent question. Unfortunately, because our planet has been used in such a way that we produce vast amount of pollutants, most of the soils in the world are not in a very good state. So if you are on a property and it's been used in a conventional way, maybe you bought it, high likelihood that your previous owner used some kind of chemicals. I'm not saying every year. On top of that, we have pollution in the air, and then you have rainfall coming down. So that affects the soil life. So this is the bad news. The good news is that we as humans can actively restore that. And by using certain methods so that all the pollution gets broken down. That's another quality of microorganisms. If there's enough microorganisms, they can break down pollution. So actually nature will always win, even if we pollute the planet so much, we will first die from the pollution because nature will eradicate us because then we become the cancer. Nature attacks what it doesn't need. But if we turn it around and we work with nature, it can be so much better. But so the best indication is that most of the soils are not in a good state. On top of that, you can tell if your soil is compacted. That's a big issue in gardens. If chemicals have been used. And again, you need to do 95% of the soils are not in a good state. And it's also a spectrum. It's not that you can say this is very bad soil and this is good soil. There's a spectrum. You can always do better. And so more than the question if your soil is in a good or bad state is like, how can I make the soil better so that I move on the spectrum so that my system becomes more resilient? And the best way of doing that is using high quality compost. And I'm saying high quality compost because most of the compost that we buy in garden centers or that the municipalities now give away for free or at a super low price, it's not compost waste that is burnt almost because they do it in these facilities there's a lot of heat generated. And so if you have too much heat in the composting process, you kill all the microorganisms. Some of them die most of them die at 60 degrees Celsius. Hot composting is not necessarily very hot composting is actually bad. Some heat is good because then the microbiology gets stimulated. But so you need to know how to make high quality compost. There's a whole science to that. Or how to stimulate microbiology by using other applications like compost tea is what we also use sometimes or in many projects. Or if you don't have the time, patience, or energy to do all of that yourself, what I recommend is to go to regenerative farmers and ask them hey, do you have some high quality compost? Because they know how to make it and what it means. So depending on where you are in the world, you can do a little research, Google regenerative farmers. Anyways, I encourage everyone to do that, just to connect with them and buy their products, their vegetables, their meat, because farmers can use your help too. If you buy it directly from them, then they get the right price for their products. And if you can buy compost from them and then you spread that in your garden, and you also don't need huge amounts, people think, I'm making my garden, I'm going to put a nice thick layer of compost and then everything will grow. It works because that compost is so low in whatever we need but when you use the high quality compost, it's more like a biostimulant. It's like a probiotic for your gut. We sometimes drink probiotics. It's good for our gut system. The same thing for the soil. explained in a nutshell, I think.
We can learn a lot from nature. There's a lot of people who teach with analogies to nature. What have you learned about yourself as an entrepreneur working with this type of business with the earth and nature?
That's a very good question and a tough one because I'm very impatient helping people and growing my business, but a garden and the plants need time. So you have to, that's what I do all the time. I'm constantly planting seeds, and that's an analogy. But for me, it's like talking to you and planting a little seed in your head. Hopefully your listeners are also like, that's something interesting. So that's in business what you have to do. You have to network. You have to constantly be planting seeds everywhere as much as you can, so that one day they will sprout and they will come back to you. Maybe a listener to this podcast, in 5 years, they'll be like, oh, I remember this guy. He's doing this cool stuff with plants. Now I have my property or starting in development, and I don't want to do it in a bad way for the environment, and I want to make it less maintenance. I need to find this guy again. So that's planting seeds. I joke about it a lot that I'm in the business of planting seeds, and I am. So that's interesting. First one. I think then also I'm trying to think how we could link that, but what I often see in my industry and in many industries of people that are trying to do good for the world is that they have a blockage around how to enroll and how to sell people on your solution. They often think, oh, if I'm doing something good for the environment or for humanity, it should be at a very low price, or it should be for free almost. And that is a really dangerous thing, because if you do that, first of all, your potential clients won't value your product. It's a very weird thing that I've experienced myself as I've been progressively increasing my prices because I have more demand and I feel that it's definitely worth it and we get better results. People value it more. Like my masterclass, when I started, at the beginning, I did it for friends and family, so it was very affordable. I gave it to someone for free, even a dear friend. And the funny thing is, when I gave it for free, they don't show up to the meetings. And this is even a friend who says, I'd love to do the course. I don't have the money, but I'd love to learn from you. And they don't come to the meetings. And as I've been progressively increasing my prices, and it's the same course, we did some minor adjustments, but in essence, it's the same course. And as I increase my price, people value it way more. They come to every meeting. They do all the work that's necessary. So I think we have to change the paradigm in terms of, okay, we can do extremely good for the planet, for humanity, for everything, but we also have to honor our pricing and understand that it's super valuable. And that's what I'm trying to do with my work, is like everything has a price and you gotta be standing firmly with what you believe this is worth. And the more you can link it to, I'm always asking my clients if they want to have a transformation of their garden, like, well, how is your garden today? It's bad. And every morning I wake up and I look outside and it's hot. And then I ask them, like, how does it impact your life? And in some, like, I want to work with people that are really bothered about it and then really want to change. So some people say, it's affecting my relationship. I don't sleep about it. I wake up every morning dreaded because I'm looking outside and it's not nice. Also making people understand with whatever solution you have, you may think, oh, it's only impacting this small portion of their life and I'm doing gardens. So you might think, how does it change lives or impact people? But I know if I've seen my results with my clients, their lives change. They're happier, a place where they can invite friends and they can collect plants, they can eat their food. This is huge. And so I'm creating huge value and that needs to be priced correctly. So I think that one is a big one. And in nature, there's no scarcity, right? So I was trying to think what's the link, and now I found it. It's like nature is all about abundance. Nature is constantly growing and overflowing. If you look at trees, how much seeds they produce way too much seeds for what the world needs, and only a few get germinated, or it's always producing in abundance. And that's what we have to do with our business, both in how to think for our clients, how to enroll people and also how to deliver the work. I see far too often people like they enroll a client and they make an agreement of something and then they only do 90% of the work and then they say, oh yeah, I've done already 90%, now it's done. They don't go 100%. I have a business coaching group too. It's called Regenerative Entrepreneurs. It's all people in my field that want to do good for the environment, but they're in the beginning days. They don't know how to sell, how to do positioning, branding, marketing, all that's good stuff. And so I tell them, you gotta definitely stand strong with your pricing, know how to sell. But I see they often underprice. I think that's really important in that sense.
Here's what I believe. You're going to pay the price either way. You're going to pay the price to make yourself better, or you're going to pay the price in still feeling bad or having your relationships fail or having your business fail. So pick your price. And it's hard either way also, right? When you're going after your dreams, when you're wanting to start a business that has true impact in the world, it takes a lot of hard work, but it's hard also not doing it. I know that in my experience.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I see it all the time. It's funny. As I was on a cruise ship speaking to people about a real estate group. I was at a real estate conference on a cruise ship. And in the morning, I like to be healthy and fit. And in the morning, I go to the gym. And it's not to judge anyone, but I see people in the morning smoking cigarettes, chilling and it looks nice, enjoying that cigarette, sitting down. And I go to the gym and I do my heart in the gym and work out and sweat. So it's like I'm paying my heart today so that I can live longer and healthier and better. They are not paying their heart today. They will pay for it, unfortunately. And I don't wish it for anyone, but they most likely will pay for it later. That's another important one.
Yeah. And just to bring it full circle, when we put the work into what grows us, what grows our business, there is abundance. And then from there, we know the value that we bring to people, and we are in the business of planting seeds. And I love that analogy that you use, that you're planting seeds. Yes, you have your business, but you're planting seeds to actually help people with their own, not just physical health, but mental health, emotional health. There's a reason why in Japan they say, go take a forest bath. I never heard that, but I know for myself, and if you're listening to this, you probably know for yourself as well, that when you step out of the concrete jungle and into nature, the forest, the real jungle, maybe it's the beach and it's on the coast, you know that it does something different to your system. It regulates your system in a way that brings you back to what's really important. And it just helps you reprioritize and regulate yourself. I'm a big proponent of nature. And if we actually apply these principles to our home in our backyards, then we don't even have to actually go that far. You don't have to take 2 hours to get to the beach. You could just step outside into your own garden by using Matthieu's masterclass and all of that. I want to thank you, Matthieu, for being part of this podcast and just for sharing what you have done, what you've learned, and putting it in a format that other people can replicate what you're doing. And the rewards are going to be 100 times more than you could ever imagine. I feel like what you're doing is like saying it does take a village for us to heal our earth and heal ourselves. And it's possible. So thank you for helping us do that. Are there any last thoughts you'd like to leave our listener with before I let you go?
Pauline, I have to thank you too. It's been amazing great questions that you asked me, and I'm so excited to see what's coming next. And I love your work. And I have to say, I was thinking about small victories, what's important for me, small victories. And I had this light bulb moment is for me, and it's the same in all the work, the projects that we do, I have to stack small victories. And the most important thing that I found for myself is I have to have some small victories as early as possible into the day. What I've learned myself, the first thing that I do when I wake up is get my first victory in, is to make my bed. And I know if I make my bed, it makes me feel I have already made an accomplishment. And then from there, the day gets much easier. So I just wanted to add that in there too. as we wrap it up.
Thank you. And when we put ourselves in a place where we are constantly wanting to have these small victories, it actually expands our accountability, because now we're looking for ways to create those wins throughout our day. And that's what I love about it. So thank you for sharing how you incorporate your small victory into your life on a daily basis. And it doesn't have to be big. To you who's listening to this, one truth becomes crystal clear. Nature is not the obstacle, misunderstanding it is. When we slow down enough to observe how nature works, we gain access to a wisdom that's patient, powerful, and endlessly abundant. Whether we're designing land, building a business, or shaping a life we're proud of, the same principle applies. Alignment always outperforms force. Living victoriously doesn't mean conquering everything in your path. Sometimes it means learning when to collaborate, when to trust the process, and when to let growth happen naturally. Your small victory today might be simply this: choosing to work with life instead of against it, and watching what becomes possible when you do. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Small Victories Podcast. And until we meet again, be blessed.
Angel of light, come into me. Show me what I need to see.